I stared at my phone screen in the baggage claim area, my fingers trembling as I typed into our family group chat. Flight lands at 5 p.m. Can someone pick me up? The fluorescent airport lights felt harsh against my swollen eyes. I had just spent 14 hours traveling from London, where I had buried my husband David alone. My brother Jake's response came within seconds. "We're busy. Try Uber." Then my mom added, "Why didn't you plan better?" I watched other passengers being embraced by loved ones while I stood there, completely invisible to my own family. "No worries," I typed back. The Uber driver was a chatty man in his 50s who kept glancing at me through the rearview mirror. "Business trip?" he asked, as we pulled away from Denver International Airport. I pressed my face against the cool window glass, watching the familiar Colorado landscape blur past. "Something like that," I whispered, not trusting my voice to say more. David had collapsed on our hotel room floor in Edinburgh 3 weeks ago. One moment he was laughing at something on television, the next he was gone. The doctors said his heart simply stopped. At 38 years old, my husband of 8 years had died on what was supposed to be our anniversary celebration. I had called my family from the hospital, sobbing into the phone as I tried to explain what had happened. Jake had been the first to respond. "That's terrible, Carmen, but you know we can't afford international flights right now." Sarah, my younger sister, had agreed immediately. "The restaurant is swamped this month. I can't possibly leave." My mother had been more direct. "These things happen, honey. You're strong. You'll handle it." So I had handled it. Alone. I navigated Scottish funeral homes and crematoriums, dealt with international paperwork, and sat by myself in a small chapel, while a minister who had never met David said generic words about eternal rest. The only flowers were the ones I had purchased myself. The Uber pulled into my driveway in suburban Lakewood, and I stared at the house David and I had bought 5 years ago. The garden he had tended so carefully was already showing signs of neglect. His car sat in the garage, still holding the coffee cup he had left there before our trip. $23.40, the driver said gently. I handed him $30 and stumbled out with my single suitcase. Inside, everything was exactly as we had left it. David's reading glasses on the coffee table, his favorite mug in the sink, the photo of us from our wedding day still smiling from the mantelpiece. I sank onto our couch and opened the family group chat again. Jake had posted a photo from some brewery, raising a beer with his friends. Weekend vibes. Sarah had shared pictures from her restaurant's new menu launch. Mom had posted about her book club's wine and cheese party. None of them had mentioned my text. None of them had asked if I had made it home safely. I walked to the kitchen where 3 weeks of mail was stacked on the counter. Bills, advertisements, and several official-looking letters I had been too emotionally drained to deal with. One envelope bore the letterhead of Henderson, Morrison, and Associates, the law firm David had used for his consulting business. Another was from Pinnacle Business Solutions, David's company. My phone buzzed. A text from Marcus Chen, David's business partner. "Carmen, I know you're grieving, but we really need to discuss some urgent business matters. When you're ready, please call me." I had been avoiding Marcus's calls for weeks. David's small consulting firm had always seemed like just another part of our quiet life together. He would work from his home office, helping businesses improve their operations, while I managed my part-time job at the local library. It had never seemed urgent before, but now, sitting in our empty house, I realized how much I didn't know about David's business world. I picked up the letter from Henderson, Morrison, and Associates with shaking hands. The return address was embossed in gold lettering, suggesting this was a more prestigious firm than I had realized. I tore open the envelope, expecting some routine business correspondence. Instead, I found a letter that made my breath catch in my throat. "Dear Mrs. Rodriguez, we are writing to inform you that the acquisition of Pinnacle Business Solutions has been finalized. As per the agreement signed by your late husband, you are now the sole beneficiary of the sale proceeds, totaling $12.4 million. I read the letter 3 times, before the words began to make sense. $12 million. David had never mentioned selling his business. He had never mentioned any acquisition. In 8 years of marriage, he had never said a word about millions of dollars. I called the law office first thing Monday morning, my hands still shaking as I dialed the number. Jonathan Henderson, the senior partner, agreed to see me that afternoon. His office was in downtown Denver, occupying the top floor of a gleaming corporate tower I had driven past hundreds of times without ever imagining I would be inside. Jonathan was a distinguished man in his 60s who greeted me with genuine sympathy. "Mrs. Rodriguez, please accept my deepest condolences. David was an exceptional man and a brilliant businessman." "I don't understand," I said, settling into a leather chair across from his massive desk. "David never told me about any sale. I thought he just did small consulting projects." Jonathan smiled sadly. David was very modest about his success. Pinnacle Business Solutions was one of the most innovative efficiency consulting firms in the Southwest. When Techno Global Corporation approached him about acquisition, he had been planning to surprise you with the news after your anniversary trip. He opened a thick file folder. David restructured everything 6 months ago. Every asset, every account, every investment is in your name. He wanted to ensure your complete financial security. The next 2 hours were a blur of legal documents and financial statements. David's small consulting firm had generated over $2 million in revenue annually for the past 4 years. He had quietly built relationships with major corporations across 3 states. The acquisition wasn't just about money. Techno Global wanted David's proprietary analysis systems and his team of 12 employees. He insisted on protecting his staff, Jonathan explained. Every employee received substantial bonuses and guaranteed positions with the acquiring company. David wouldn't sign unless their futures were secured. I thought about my family's reaction when I had asked for help with David's funeral expenses. We can't afford international flights. Meanwhile, my husband had been worth millions. "There's more," Jonathan said gently. He handed me a leather portfolio. David kept detailed journals about his business philosophy and personal thoughts. He wanted you to understand his motivations. That evening, I sat in David's home office, reading his private writings by lamplight. His journal entries painted a picture of a man who had worked tirelessly, not just for our future, but to free me from something I hadn't even realized I was trapped in. "Carmen doesn't know how often her family calls asking for money," he had written 6 months ago. Jake wanted $50,000 for his restaurant expansion. Sarah needed $20,000 for her divorce attorney. Helen asked for $30,000 to renovate her kitchen. They always call when Carmen is at work. They always ask me not to mention it to her. I flipped through page after page of similar entries. My family had been treating David like their personal bank account, and he had been refusing their requests while protecting me from the knowledge of their manipulation. "I love Carmen too much to poison her relationship with her family," another entry read. "But I also love her too much to enable their treatment of her as a source of funds rather than a person." After our trip, I planned to have an honest conversation with all of them. The final entry was dated the day before our departure for Scotland. "The acquisition is complete. Carmen will never have to worry about money again, and more importantly, she'll never have to depend on people who only value her for what she can provide. I can't wait to see her face when I tell her she's free." My phone rang, interrupting my reading. It was my mother. "Carmen, honey," I was thinking. "Maybe we should have a family dinner soon, to support you through your grief." "That's thoughtful, Mom." "Well, we're family. And now that poor David is gone, you'll need us more than ever. I imagine he left you with some debt to handle, the funeral costs and all." I stared at David's journal, his words about my family's manipulation clear in black ink. "Actually, Mom, David left me very well provided for." "Oh, that's nice, dear. A little life insurance, I suppose." "Well, we should still get together. Jake has been having such a hard time with his restaurant. Sarah's dealing with her divorce expenses. Maybe you could help out family a little bit." I closed the journal softly. We'll see, Mom. After I hung up, I called Marcus. It was time to learn about the husband I thought I had known. Marcus met me at David's office the next morning. The Pinnacle Business Solutions suite was far more impressive than I had imagined. Modern, professional, and bustling with activity despite the recent transition. David's employees greeted me with genuine warmth and shared stories that brought tears to my eyes. David paid for my daughter's college tuition when I couldn't afford it, said Patricia, his office manager. He called it an advance on future performance bonuses. He bought my family groceries for 3 months when my husband was laid off, added James, one of his analysts. Never made it feel like charity, said it was an investment in team stability. Marcus walked me through David's business philosophy. He believed that successful businesses take care of their people. He paid above market rates, provided exceptional benefits, and created profit-sharing programs that made everyone here invested in our success. He never told me any of this, I said, overwhelmed by these glimpses of David's generosity. He didn't want recognition. He just wanted to build something meaningful. Marcus opened another folder. There's something else. David had plans for a foundation. He wanted to establish programs for small business development and financial literacy education. He was going to name it after you. I spent the afternoon reviewing David's foundation plans. He had envisioned scholarships, mentorship programs, and support networks for entrepreneurs from disadvantaged backgrounds. Every document bore notes in his familiar handwriting, outlining how he wanted to use his success to create opportunities for others. When I finally returned home that evening, I found my sister Sarah's car in my driveway. She was waiting on my front porch with Jake and my mother. They all wore expressions of determined concern that immediately made me suspicious. "Carmen, we need to talk," Sarah said, standing as I approached. "We're worried about you making important decisions while you're still grieving." I unlocked my front door and let them into the living room where David's presence still filled every corner. They arranged themselves on the couch and chairs like a tribunal, while I remained standing. "Honey," my mother began, her voice dripping with artificial sweetness, "we've been thinking about your situation. Losing David so suddenly must have left you with so many financial worries." Jake leaned forward, his expression serious. "We know David was just doing small consulting work. Those funeral expenses in Scotland must have been devastating. We want to help you figure out what's next." I watched their faces, remembering David's journal entries about their secret phone calls. "What exactly are you suggesting?" Sarah pulled out a notepad, which should have been my first warning. "We've done some research. The house has substantial equity. David's business might have some value if you sell it quickly. We think you should consider moving somewhere less expensive while you get back on your feet. Maybe a nice apartment closer to family," Mom added. "Somewhere we can keep an eye on you. And the house sale proceeds could be invested wisely," Jake continued. "I know some great investment opportunities. My restaurant is expanding, and I could use a partner." I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the November weather. "You want me to sell the house David and I built together so Jake can expand his restaurant?" "It's not just about the restaurant," Sarah said quickly. "We're thinking about your long-term stability. You'll need income, and family businesses are always more secure." My mother reached over and patted my hand. "David was a sweet man, but he wasn't much of a provider. We don't want you struggling alone." The casual dismissal of David's worth made my chest tighten with anger. David provided very well for me. A small consulting business barely generates enough for one person, let alone building any real wealth, Jake said dismissively. "I'm talking about real money, real opportunities." I walked to David's desk and picked up his journal. "Did you know David refused to loan you $50,000 for your restaurant, Jake?" Jake's face flushed red. "I don't know what you're talking about." "March 15th. You called and asked for $50,000 to expand your catering operation. David said no." I flipped through the pages. "Sarah, April 22nd. $20,000 for divorce attorney fees. Also denied." Sarah's mouth fell open. "He never told you we asked for help?" "He protected me from knowing how often you called asking for money." I looked at my mother. $30,000 for kitchen renovation, Mom. Denied in May. The room fell silent. Finally, Jake stood up, his hands clenched into fists. So what if we asked for help? We're family. That's what families do. But you never asked me. You went behind my back to my husband, and when he said no, you just pretended it never happened. We didn't want to burden you, Mom said weakly. But you were perfectly willing to burden David. I set the journal down. The man you just called a poor provider was protecting me from your manipulation. Sarah's carefully prepared notepad suddenly made sense. This isn't about helping me, is it? This is about David's money. What money? Jake snapped. The man worked from his spare bedroom. I walked to my purse and pulled out the letter from the law office. David sold his business 3 weeks before he died. Techno Global Corporation paid $12.4 million for Pinnacle Business Solutions. The silence that followed was deafening. Jake's face went through several colors before settling on pale gray. Sarah's notepad slipped from her fingers. My mother simply stared. 12 million? Sarah whispered. And he never told us? Mom's voice was shrill with disbelief. He was going to surprise me after our anniversary trip. I folded the letter and put it back in my purse. The same trip none of you could afford to attend his funeral. Jake's shock was rapidly transforming into something uglier. $12 million. And he kept it secret? What kind of husband does that? The kind who loved me enough to handle your constant demands for money without making me choose between you and him. Well, now you have to choose, Sarah said, standing up. Her earlier sweetness had evaporated completely. We're your family, Carmen. David is gone. You need us, and we need you to remember what family means. I looked at these 3 people who had raised me, who I had loved and trusted, and saw them clearly for the first time. What family means. You couldn't be bothered to pick me up from the airport after I buried my husband. You spent that evening posting pictures of parties and book clubs, while I sat here alone with his belongings. We didn't know about the money then, Mom protested. And that makes it better? You couldn't support me when you thought I was poor, but now that you know I'm rich, suddenly you want to help? Jake's anger finally erupted. Don't get all high and mighty, Carmen. That money should benefit the whole family. David's gone. He doesn't need it. But you do? We all do. Sarah's divorce cleaned her out. My restaurant is struggling. Mom's living on Social Security. You could solve all of our problems. The way you solved mine when I needed you? Sarah tried a different approach. Carmen, you're not thinking clearly. Grief makes people do irrational things. $12 million is too much responsibility for someone in your emotional state. I almost laughed. So now you're concerned about my emotional state? Where was that concern 3 weeks ago? Marcus knocked on my front door at that exact moment. I had called him earlier to discuss David's foundation plans, and his timing couldn't have been more perfect. I hope I'm not interrupting, he said as I let him in. I brought those foundation documents David wanted you to review. Jake immediately stepped forward. And you are? Marcus Chen, David's business partner. You must be Carmen's family. Marcus looked around the room, taking in the tense atmosphere. I'm sorry for your loss. David spoke of you often. Did he mention the money often too? Jake's voice was heavy with sarcasm. Marcus's expression became guarded. I'm not sure what you mean. $12 million, Sarah said. Carmen just told us about David's secret sale. It wasn't secret, Marcus replied calmly. David planned to tell Carmen after their anniversary trip. He wanted it to be special. But he never told his family, Mom said accusingly. Marcus looked at me, and I saw understanding dawn in his eyes. Actually, David mentioned that Carmen's family had been asking for substantial loans. He was concerned about protecting Carmen from financial pressure. The room went silent again. Jake's face was getting redder by the minute. So he documented our private conversations? Sarah's voice was dangerous. He documented his own thoughts and decisions, I said, including his decision to refuse your requests for money. Well, that's all going to change now, Jake said, stepping closer to me. Carmen's going to do the right thing for her family. Marcus moved slightly, positioning himself between Jake and me. Carmen, Maybe we should discuss the foundation plans another time. No, I said clearly. Actually, this is perfect timing. Marcus, I've made a decision about David's money. Jake smiled triumphantly. That's my girl. Family first. I looked at each of them. These people who had shared my childhood, who had taught me what love was supposed to look like, who had failed me so completely when I needed them most. I'm donating all of it to charity. Every penny. David's foundation will serve disadvantaged families, and I won't keep a dollar for myself. The sound of Sarah's gasp was audible. Jake's mouth fell open. My mother simply stared in shock. You can't be serious, Sarah whispered. Completely serious. Your greed has made this decision very easy for me. Jake's reaction was immediate and violent. He slammed his fist on David's coffee table, sending a framed photo crashing to the floor. You're being ridiculous, Carmen. You can't just throw away millions of dollars because you're upset with us. My mother began crying, but they weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of frustration and desperation. Carmen, honey, you're not thinking straight. All that money could help so many people in the family. It will help people, I said calmly. Just not you. Sarah had gone completely pale. You can't mean this. You're going to give millions to strangers instead of helping your own family? My family abandoned me when I needed them most. These strangers David wanted to help have never done that. Jake started pacing the living room like a caged animal. This is David's fault. He poisoned you against us. He was always trying to separate you from your family. David protected me from you. There's a difference. Protected you from what? Jake spun around to face me. From people who love you? From people who've been there your whole life? You weren't there when I buried my husband alone. You weren't there when I called crying from a foreign hospital. You weren't there when I needed a ride from the airport. We're here now, Mom sobbed, because now you know about the money. Marcus had been quietly observing the family dynamics, and his expression grew more concerned as Jake's behavior escalated. Carmen, perhaps I should call you tomorrow. No, stay, I said. I want witnesses to this conversation. Sarah tried to regain her composure. Carmen, let's think about this rationally. You could keep some money for yourself and still help family. You don't have to choose between charity and us. But you made me choose between you and David. You made me choose between your convenience and my grief. Jake's voice turned threatening. You're going to regret this, Carmen. Family is forever. When your charity work gets boring and you're all alone, don't come crying to us. I'm already alone. I've been alone for 3 weeks while you posted party pictures. My mother wiped her eyes and tried a different approach. David wouldn't want this. He wouldn't want you to destroy family relationships over money. I picked up David's journal from the desk. Should I read what David really thought about your financial requests? About the way you treated him like an ATM machine? We never treated him badly, Sarah protested. You treated him like he was lucky to be part of this family. Like he should be grateful for your tolerance. Jake's anger was reaching dangerous levels. He was lucky. We accepted him, even though he was nobody from nowhere. He was my husband. The man I loved. The man who built a multi-million-dollar business while you were asking him for handouts. And now you're going to waste everything he worked for on some stupid charity. Jake moved closer to me, his voice rising. You think those strangers are going to take care of you when you're old? You think they'll visit you in the hospital? Will you? I asked quietly. If I don't give you money, will you visit me in the hospital? The question hung in the air. None of them could answer it. Marcus pulled out his phone. Carmen, I'm concerned about the aggressive tone this conversation is taking. Are you threatening us? Jake turned his anger toward Marcus. I'm protecting my friend's widow from intimidation. This is family business, Sarah snapped. You need to leave. Actually, Marcus said calmly, I've been Carmen's friend longer than I was David's business partner. I knew her in college, and I introduced her to David in the first place. I stared at Marcus in surprise. What? My sister Emily was your roommate at University of Colorado. She brought you home for Thanksgiving sophomore year, remember? That's where you met David. The memory came flooding back. Emily Chen, my quiet roommate who had invited me home when I couldn't afford flights to see my own family during holidays. Her older brother Marcus had been there, along with his friend David Rodriguez, both recent business school graduates. You knew David before his business succeeded, I said slowly. Marcus nodded. I watched him build everything from nothing. I also watched how your family treated both of you over the years. Jake's face went from red to purple. You've been spying on us? I've been watching my friends be manipulated and taken advantage of by people who should have supported them. My mother stood up shakily. This is outrageous. We're not perfect, but we're family. Family doesn't ask for $50,000 behind their daughter's back, Marcus said quietly. Family doesn't skip their son-in-law's funeral because they can't afford plane tickets while asking him for loans, I added. Sarah's carefully constructed facade finally cracked completely. Fine. You want honesty? Yes, we knew David had money. My husband works in finance. He told me about the Techno Global acquisition weeks ago. We knew exactly what that sale was worth. The admission hit me like a physical blow. You knew when I called from Scotland? We knew when we told you we couldn't afford to come to the funeral. Jake nodded aggressively. And we knew when you begged for a ride from the airport like some pathetic charity case. I felt the last pieces of my family loyalty crumble away. So the coldness, the dismissal, the cruelty, that was all calculated. We wanted you to realize how much you needed us, Mom said through her tears. We wanted you to come home grateful for family support. You wanted me vulnerable and desperate, so I'd be easier to manipulate. Sarah's notepad on the floor suddenly made perfect sense. They had planned this intervention down to the last detail, banking on my grief and their perceived financial leverage. Marcus was quietly typing on his phone. Carmen, I think you should know that I've been documenting this conversation. You can't record us without permission, Jake snarled. Actually, Colorado is a one-party consent state, Marcus replied. And Carmen consented when she asked me to stay as a witness. The realization that their threats and admissions had been recorded sent all three of them into panic mode. You can't use that against us, Sarah said desperately. I can use it to protect Carmen from future intimidation, Marcus responded. I walked to the window and looked out at the neighborhood David and I had loved. I want all of you to leave now. Carmen, please, Mom begged. We can work this out. No, we can't. You've shown me exactly who you are. When you thought I was poor, I wasn't worth a phone call. When you discovered I was rich, I became worth threatening. Jake made one last attempt at intimidation. You'll change your mind when reality sets in. When you realize how alone you really are, I turned from the window to face them. I'm already alone. I've been alone since the moment you chose your convenience over my grief. The only difference now is that I know it. Marcus stepped forward. I think it's time for you to leave. All of you. As they gathered their things, Sarah made one final plea. Carmen, we're still your family. We love you. No, I said quietly. You love David's money. You tolerated me to get access to it. There's a difference. They left without another word. But I could hear them arguing in the driveway. Jake's voice was the loudest, blaming Sarah for revealing too much, blaming Mom for not being convincing enough, blaming everyone but themselves. After their car pulled away, Marcus and I sat in the quiet living room surrounded by David's belongings and the wreckage of my family relationships. Are you really going to donate all the money? Marcus asked gently. I looked at him. This friend who had quietly protected David and me for years, without asking for anything in return. What do you think I should do? I think David wanted you to be free. Free from financial worry. Free from manipulation. Free to build the life you deserve. And if that means cutting ties with my family, then that's the price of freedom. I picked up the foundation documents David had prepared. Plans for helping disadvantaged families, for creating opportunities, for building something lasting and meaningful. Marcus, when you introduced me to David all those years ago, did you know this would happen? He smiled sadly. I knew David was the kind of man who would love you the way you deserve to be loved. I hoped that would be enough. It is enough, I said, looking at David's photo on the mantelpiece. It's more than enough. But I wasn't prepared for what would happen next. The next morning, my phone started ringing at 6 a.m. Jake was calling repeatedly, leaving increasingly desperate voicemails. By 9 o'clock, Sarah had sent 12 text messages. My mother had called the library where I worked part-time, claiming there was a family emergency. I was sitting in David's office, reviewing foundation paperwork with Marcus, when they all arrived together again. This time, they didn't wait for permission to enter. They used the spare key Mom had kept from when she helped us move in 5 years ago. "Carmen," Jake's voice echoed through the house. "We need to talk right now." Marcus looked up from the legal documents spread across David's desk. "Did you invite them back?" "Absolutely not. We found them in the living room." But their demeanor had completely changed overnight. The aggressive confidence was gone, replaced by desperate panic. "Honey," Mom began, her voice shaking. "We talked all night, and we realized we may have said some things in the heat of the moment that we didn't mean." Sarah nodded frantically. "We were just shocked about the money. We handled it badly." Jake was pacing again, but this time it was nervous energy rather than anger. "Look, Carmen, maybe we came on too strong yesterday, but you have to understand, finding out about millions of dollars out of nowhere, it messed with our heads." I remained standing while they arranged themselves on the furniture like supplicants. "What exactly do you want?" "We want to apologize," Sarah said quickly. "We want to make things right. And we want to support David's foundation idea," Mom added. "It sounds like a wonderful way to honor his memory." The sudden change in their approach was almost comical. Yesterday they had demanded family investments and restaurant partnerships. Today they were embracing charitable giving. "You support donating all the money to strangers?" I asked. Jake's face twitched, but he managed to nod. "If that's what you think David would have wanted." "What I think David would have wanted," I said slowly, "is honesty from the people who claim to love me." "We are being honest," Sarah insisted. "We realized we were being selfish." Marcus cleared his throat. "Carmen, could I speak with you privately for a moment?" We stepped into the kitchen, leaving my family in the living room where they immediately began whispering urgently among themselves. "Something's wrong," Marcus said quietly. "That complete reversal isn't genuine remorse. People don't change overnight like that." "I know. The question is what prompted it. Have you checked social media this morning?" I pulled out my phone and opened Facebook. My mother's page was the first thing that appeared in my feed. Yesterday evening, just hours after leaving my house, she had posted a lengthy status update. "So proud of my daughter Carmen during this difficult time after losing her husband David. She's handling his business affairs with such maturity and making plans to honor his memory through charitable work. Our family is grateful for David's success and the security he provided for Carmen's future. Sometimes God works in mysterious ways." The post had dozens of comments from her church friends and book club members, all praising our family's strength and Carmen's wise financial decisions. "She made it sound like you're sharing the money willingly," Marcus observed. I scrolled to Jake's page. He had posted photos from last night celebrating at an upscale restaurant, finally getting the support I need to take my restaurant to the next level. Family investments are the best investments. Here's to new beginnings. Sarah's page was worse. She had shared a real estate listing for a house that cost $400,000. New chapter, new home. Sometimes the best things come from the worst times. Grateful for family support during my transition. "They're already spending money they don't have," I said, feeling sick, "and telling the world that you've agreed to give it to them." We returned to the living room where my family was still whispering. They fell silent when we appeared. "I've been looking at your social media posts," I said. The guilty expressions that flashed across their faces told me everything I needed to know. "Carmen, those posts were just premature excitement," Sarah stammered. "Jake, you celebrated getting family investments for your restaurant. What investments?" I was just being optimistic about our conversation. Sarah, you shared a house listing. Are you buying a house with money I haven't given you? I was just looking, planning ahead. I turned to my mother. And you told your entire church congregation that I'm sharing David's money with the family. Mom's face went pale. I was trying to present things in the best light. You lied to everyone you know about my decisions. We just wanted to show confidence in family unity, Jake said weakly. Family unity? I laughed, but there was no humor in it. You've already told everyone that I'm giving you money. You've made public commitments based on my wealth. You've even celebrated those commitments. Marcus was checking his phone. Carmen, there's more. He showed me a local news website. The headline read, Local widow honors late husband's legacy through family business investments. How did the news get this story? I asked. Sarah's divorce attorney is married to a reporter, Marcus said grimly. Look at the byline. Sure enough, the article was written by Jennifer Walsh, Sarah's divorce attorney's wife. Sarah, did you give information to a reporter? My sister couldn't meet my eyes. I just mentioned that David had been successful and that you were planning to honor his memory through business investments. You told a reporter that I was investing in Jake's restaurant? I may have mentioned the restaurant as an example of family business opportunities. The article detailed how Carmen Rodriguez is channeling her grief into supporting her brother's expanding restaurant business and her sister's real estate investments, demonstrating the power of family bonds during difficult times. None of this is true, I said. It could be true, Jake said desperately. We could make it true. By giving you millions of dollars based on lies you've already told? Marcus was still reading the article. Carmen, there's a quote here attributed to you. I grabbed his phone. The article claimed I had said, David would want his success to benefit the whole family. We're all committed to honoring his legacy through wise investments in family unity. I never said that. I've never spoken to this reporter. Sarah's face went crimson. I may have paraphrased what I thought you would want to say. You fabricated quotes and attributed them to me? The magnitude of their deception was breathtaking. Not only had they planned to manipulate me into giving them money, but when that failed, they had simply lied to the world and pretended I had agreed anyway. This is fraud, Marcus said quietly. You've misrepresented Carmen's intentions to the media and to your social networks. It's not fraud if we make it true, Jake said frantically. Carmen, just give us the money you promised, and everything works out. I never promised you anything. But we told people you did, Mom wailed. My whole church thinks you're taking care of us. I'll look like a fool if that's not true. The truth finally emerged. They hadn't just wanted my money. They had wanted the social status of being supported by their wealthy family member. They had already claimed that status publicly, and now they were trapped by their own lies. You put yourselves in this position, I said. You lied about my decisions before I made them. Sarah was crying now. Carmen, please. I already put an offer on that house. Jake already signed a lease for restaurant expansion. We trusted that family would come through. You gambled on money that wasn't yours based on decisions that weren't yours to make. But we're family, Jake shouted. You can't just let us fall. You've already fallen. You fell the moment you chose lies and manipulation over honesty and support. Marcus's phone buzzed. He answered it quietly, then returned with a grim expression. Carmen, that was my attorney. Jake and Sarah have already met with a lawyer about challenging David's will. The room went silent. Even my family looked shocked. You what? I whispered. Sarah's voice was barely audible. We were just exploring options, in case you weren't thinking clearly. You're trying to steal my husband's money through the courts? We're trying to ensure David's money benefits his family, Jake said defensively. I am his family. I was his wife. But we're your family, Mom sobbed. And if something happened to you, we'd have no claim on anything. We just wanted to protect family interests. I looked at these three people who had shaped my entire understanding of love and loyalty and realized they were strangers. Dangerous strangers. Get out, I said quietly. Carmen, please, Sarah begged. Get out of my house. Get out of my life. If you contact me again, I'll file restraining orders. Jake's desperation finally turned back to anger. Fine, but don't think this is over. We have lawyers too, and we have rights. You have no rights to my husband's money. We'll see about that. After they left, Marcus and I sat in stunned silence. They're going to fight you in court, he said finally. Let them. David made sure every document was airtight. But this could get ugly. Public. Painful. I looked around at David's belongings, his journals, his plans for the future we would never have together. Marcus, I need to ask you something. That introduction all those years ago, was it really coincidence? He smiled sadly. Emily was worried about you. She said your family took advantage of your kindness, that you always gave more than you received. She asked me to introduce you to someone who would appreciate how special you are. So you chose David. I chose the best man I knew for the woman who deserved the best. And now? Now I think David's greatest gift to you wasn't money. It was showing you that you deserve better than what your family offered. But none of us were prepared for what would happen when the story hit the evening news. That evening, I was preparing dinner when Marcus called, his voice urgent. Carmen, turn on Channel 7 News. Right now. I grabbed the remote and switched to the local news station just as the anchor began speaking. Tonight, a heartwarming story about family support in the face of tragedy. Local widow Carmen Rodriguez is honoring her late husband's business success by investing in family enterprises and charitable works. But as our investigation revealed, this story of family unity may be hiding a darker truth. My stomach dropped. This wasn't the puff piece my family had orchestrated. The camera cut to reporter Jennifer Walsh standing outside my house. David Rodriguez built a multi-million-dollar consulting empire before dying suddenly last month during an anniversary trip to Scotland. His widow Carmen returned home to find herself not only grieving, but also wealthy beyond her dreams. But according to sources close to the family, that wealth has created more problems than solutions. The screen filled with footage that made my blood run cold. Jake, Sarah, and my mother were being interviewed at what looked like Jake's restaurant. Carmen's been through so much trauma, my mother told the camera, dabbing her eyes with a tissue. We're worried that grief is affecting her judgment about financial decisions. She's talking about giving away everything David worked for. Sarah nodded earnestly. We just want what's best for Carmen. David would want his success to benefit family, not be wasted on strangers. Jake's interview was more aggressive. Carmen's always been easily influenced. Now, she's listening to David's business partner instead of her own family. We're concerned about elder financial abuse. Elder abuse? I shouted at the television. I'm 38 years old. The reporter's voice returned. But when we investigated these family claims, we discovered a pattern of financial manipulation that may have been ongoing for years. The screen showed Marcus being interviewed outside David's office building. David Rodriguez documented years of requests for loans from Carmen's family members. He was concerned about protecting his wife from financial pressure and emotional manipulation. Then came footage that shocked me. Patricia, David's office manager, was speaking to the camera. Mr. Rodriguez was very worried about Mrs. Rodriguez's family. He said they only contacted him when they needed money, never when they wanted to support Carmen. James, David's analyst, appeared next. David showed us text messages from Carmen's brother, asking for $50,000 for restaurant expansion. This was while Carmen was working part-time at a library because she thought they needed to be careful with money. The reporter continued. Our investigation also uncovered social media posts made by family members celebrating investments and purchases before any money had been committed. The screen filled with screenshots of Jake's restaurant celebration post, Sarah's house shopping, and Mom's premature announcement about family support. When we contacted Carmen Rodriguez for comment, her attorney provided us with recorded conversations from family meetings that paint a disturbing picture of manipulation and intimidation. My heart stopped. Marcus had submitted the recordings. The audio was edited, but clear enough. Jake's voice. $12 million? And he kept it secret? What kind of husband does that? Then Sarah. We're your family, Carmen. You need us, and we need you to remember what family means. And most damaging, their admission. Yes, we knew David had money. My husband works in finance. He told me about the techno-global acquisition weeks ago. Jake's voice again. And we knew when we told you we couldn't afford to come to the funeral. The reporter's conclusion was devastating. What appeared to be a story about family unity and charitable giving has revealed itself to be something much more troubling. A case of family members who abandoned a grieving widow when they thought she was poor, only to aggressively pursue her when they discovered she was wealthy. The camera returned to Jennifer Walsh. Carmen Rodriguez declined to appear on camera, but her attorney provided this statement. Mrs. Rodriguez is committed to honoring her late husband's memory through carefully planned charitable works. She asks for privacy as she continues to grieve and make thoughtful decisions about her future. The anchor concluded the segment. This investigation will continue as we follow up on claims of potential legal challenges to Mr. Rodriguez's estate. Carmen Rodriguez's story raises important questions about family obligations, financial abuse, and how grief can make people vulnerable to manipulation. My phone started ringing immediately. Unknown numbers, probably other reporters. I turned it off and sat in stunned silence. Marcus knocked on my door 20 minutes later. Are you okay? Did you know they were going to air that? I gave them the information when they called for fact-checking. Jennifer Walsh contacted me after Sarah gave her that false quote from you. She wanted to verify the story. And you gave her everything? Marcus sat down across from me. Carmen, your family was spreading lies about you to the media. They were presenting themselves as victims of your poor decisions, while simultaneously planning legal challenges to David's will. Someone needed to tell the truth. But now it's public. Everyone knows about the money, about my family's behavior, about everything. Yes. And I thought about that question. What exactly was I afraid of? People will think I'm awful for cutting off my family. People will understand that you were protecting yourself from people who abandoned you in your worst moment and then tried to manipulate you when they learned about your inheritance. My computer was still open on the kitchen counter. Against my better judgment, I checked the news station's website. The story had been posted online, with additional documents Marcus had provided. Excerpts from David's journal, financial records showing the family's loan requests, and timestamps proving when they had learned about the inheritance. The comments section was active. Most were supportive. Good for her. Family doesn't always mean blood. Those people abandoned her when her husband died and only came back for money. She owes them nothing. This woman deserves peace to grieve. Her family is disgusting. But some were critical. Family is family. She should share the wealth. Seems selfish to give millions to strangers instead of helping relatives. Must be nice to be rich enough to cut off your own mother. Does it bother you? Marcus asked, watching me read. Some, but not as much as I expected. I closed the laptop. Marcus, can I ask you something personal? Of course. Why did you really give the information to the reporter? He was quiet for a long moment. Because David asked me to protect you if something happened to him. He was worried about exactly this scenario. He knew his family would come after me. He knew they had been coming after him for years. He was afraid that if something happened to him, they would transfer that pressure to you. Marcus pulled out his phone. There's something else. David sent me an email the day before your trip to Scotland. He showed me the message. Marcus, if anything happens to me, please make sure Carmen knows she doesn't owe anyone anything. She spent her whole life giving more than she receives. The money should free her, not trap her in new obligations. Help her understand that choosing her own happiness over other people's demands isn't selfish. It's necessary. I started crying, finally grieving not just for David's death, but for the marriage we had built and the future he had planned for me. He really did protect me, didn't he? Every day, in ways you're still discovering. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Carmen, this is Jennifer Walsh. I'd like to give you an opportunity to tell your side of the story. Your family has now contacted 3 other media outlets claiming you're being manipulated by business associates. A full interview could set the record straight. I showed the message to Marcus. What do you think? I think David would want you to stand up for yourself, but only if you're ready. I thought about David's journal entry. Carmen will never have to depend on people who only value her for what she can provide. Set up the interview, I said. It's time people heard the truth from me, but I had no idea how much that decision would change everything. 6 months later, I stood in the ballroom of the Denver Marriott, surrounded by 200 people who had come to celebrate the first anniversary of the David Rodriguez Foundation for Family Financial Literacy. The evening had raised $300,000 for programs that would help vulnerable families avoid the kind of manipulation I had experienced. Marcus approached with a champagne flute and a smile. The silent auction exceeded all expectations. David would be so proud. I looked around the room at the faces of people who had become my chosen family. David's former employees had all stayed involved with the foundation. Patricia now managed our grant programs. James had developed our financial education curriculum. The colleagues who had shared stories of David's generosity had become my closest supporters. Carmen? A familiar voice made me turn around. Sarah stood behind me, looking smaller and more uncertain than I had ever seen her. Sarah. I hadn't spoken to any of my family since the television interview 6 months ago, when I had calmly explained exactly what had happened and why I had chosen to cut contact. Could we talk privately? She asked. We stepped onto the hotel's outdoor terrace. Sarah looked like she had been crying recently, and I felt an unwelcome stab of sympathy. I wanted to apologize, she began. Really apologize. Not the fake apology we tried before, but a real one. Okay, the interview you did. It made me see things differently. When you explained how it felt to be abandoned at the airport, to bury David alone, to come home to our party pictures, I realized how selfish we had been. I waited, saying nothing. I've been going to therapy, Sarah continued, trying to understand why I acted that way. The therapist helped me see that I've been jealous of you for years. Your marriage to David, your stability, your happiness. When I learned about the money, all that jealousy exploded. And now? Now I've lost my marriage completely. I had to sell the house I couldn't afford, and Jake's restaurant failed when his investors pulled out after the news coverage. Mom barely speaks to anyone from church anymore. I felt a complex mixture of emotions, sadness, vindication, and surprising relief that my family was finally experiencing consequences for their actions. Are you telling me this because you want forgiveness? Or because you want money? Sarah's face crumpled. Because I want my sister back. I know I don't deserve it. I know we treated you horribly. But I miss you, and I want to try to earn your trust again. What about Jake and Mom? Jake's still angry. He blames you for his business failure instead of taking responsibility for his own choices. Mom is complicated. She goes back and forth between guilt and resentment. I considered Sarah's words carefully. In therapy sessions I had started attending to process my grief, I had learned about healthy boundaries and conditional relationships. Sarah, if I were to consider rebuilding any kind of relationship with you, it would have to be on completely different terms. I understand. No expectations about money. No guilt trips about family obligations. No manipulation of any kind. I agree. And you would have to prove over time that you've genuinely changed, not just that you regret the consequences of getting caught. Sarah nodded eagerly. I'll do whatever it takes. Then we can start with occasional coffee meetings. Very slowly. And if you slide back into old patterns, I'm done permanently. Thank you, she whispered. Marcus appeared on the terrace. Carmen, they're ready for your closing remarks. I returned to the ballroom, where a podium had been set up in front of a large screen displaying photos from the foundation's first year of work. Families who had received financial literacy education, small business owners who had gotten microloans, children who had received college scholarships. Good evening, everyone, I began, looking out at the faces of people who had chosen to support David's vision. A year ago, I was a different person. I was grieving, vulnerable, and surrounded by people who saw my pain as an opportunity for their own gain. A few people in the audience nodded knowingly. My late husband David left me with an incredible gift, not just financial security, but the freedom to choose who deserves my time, my energy, and my trust. The David Rodriguez Foundation represents that freedom. I clicked to the next slide, showing statistics about the families we had helped. This year, we provided financial literacy classes to 800 families. We helped 250 people start small businesses. We gave college scholarships to 45 students from disadvantaged backgrounds. The applause was warm and sustained. But more importantly, we proved that David's philosophy was correct. When you invest in people who are genuinely trying to improve their lives, rather than people who simply want to benefit from your success, everyone wins. I looked directly at Sarah, who was wiping away tears. I've learned that true family isn't determined by genetics or childhood bonds. True family consists of people who show up for you in your darkest moments, who celebrate your successes without expecting payment, and who love you for who you are rather than what you can provide. Marcus was smiling proudly from the front row. David used to say that the best investment is in people who invest in others. Everyone in this room tonight represents that philosophy. You're here not because you expect something from me, but because you believe in the mission we're building together. The final slide showed a photo of David and me from our wedding day, young and hopeful, and completely unaware of what lay ahead. David didn't leave me money to make me powerful. He left me money to make me free. Free from relationships based on obligation rather than affection. Free from people who see generosity as weakness rather than strength. Free to build the life I deserve with people who deserve me. The standing ovation lasted several minutes. Afterward, as people mingled and shared stories, I reflected on how dramatically my life had changed. 6 months ago, my family's betrayal had felt like the end of the world. Tonight, surrounded by genuine friends and meaningful work, it felt like the beginning of the life David had wanted me to have. Patricia approached with a clipboard. Carmen, we've had 12 new families sign up for next month's financial literacy classes, and the scholarship applications for next year are already coming in. That's wonderful news. There's something else, she said, lowering her voice. Jake was here earlier. Security asked him to leave, but he wanted me to give you this. She handed me a handwritten letter. I opened it carefully. Carmen, I know I have no right to contact you after everything that happened. I know I was wrong about everything. About David. About money. About family. I lost my restaurant, my marriage, and my self-respect because I let greed and jealousy control my actions. I don't expect forgiveness, but I wanted you to know that I finally understand what David meant to you and why you protected his legacy from people like me. I hope you're happy. You deserve to be, Jake. I folded the letter and put it in my purse. Perhaps someday I would be ready to consider reconciliation with Jake as well. But not yet. The wounds were still too fresh, and I had learned that forgiveness was a process, not a destination. As the evening wound down, I found myself standing with Marcus on the hotel terrace again, looking out at the Denver skyline. David would be amazed by everything you've accomplished, he said. We've accomplished. I couldn't have done any of this without your support. You could have, but I'm glad you didn't have to. I thought about the question I wanted to ask the audience watching this story, the people who might be facing their own family manipulation or struggling with difficult relationships. Marcus, what would you say to someone who's being pressured to prioritize family loyalty over their own well-being? He considered the question carefully. I'd say that real love doesn't require you to sacrifice your happiness for someone else's comfort. Real family, whether biological or chosen, wants you to thrive, not just survive. Perfect. That was exactly the message I wanted to share. I turned toward the camera in my mind, imagining the viewers who had followed this journey from beginning to end. Here's what I want you to remember from my story, I said to the invisible audience. You don't owe anyone access to your success, your money, or your emotional energy simply because they're related to you. True family shows up in your worst moments, not just when they need something from you. The people who love you want you to be happy and free, not obligated and trapped. I paused, thinking about David's letter and his final gift of freedom. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is walk away from people who only value you for what you can provide. It's not selfish to choose your own well-being over other people's demands. It's necessary. The foundation dinner was ending, but my new life was just beginning. I want to ask you something, I said to my imaginary audience. Have you ever been in a situation where family members expected you to sacrifice your own happiness for their benefit? How did you handle it? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. I smiled, feeling David's presence in the work we were doing together, even though he was gone. Thank you for following my journey from grief and betrayal to healing and freedom. If this story resonated with you, please like this video, subscribe to hear more stories like this one, and share it with anyone who might need to hear that they deserve better than manipulation disguised as love. I looked out at the Denver lights twinkling below us, feeling more peace than I had experienced since David's death. Remember, the greatest gift you can give yourself is the freedom to choose who deserves your love, your time, and your trust. David taught me that lesson, and now I'm sharing it with you. The city sparkled with possibilities, and for the first time in months, I was excited about what tomorrow might bring. Until next time, choose the people who choose you. You deserve nothing less.